My name is Alice Matthews, I'm 35, and I never thought I'd live to see the day when my own success would turn into my family's weapon against me. 7 years ago, my parents slammed the door in my face and told me I was no longer their daughter. I built my life back from nothing alone, without a single dollar or word of support from them. And just when I thought I was free, they came crawling back. Not with apologies. Not with love. But with a demand so outrageous it left me shaking. Sell your house, Alice. Lucas owes $240,000, and you're the only one who can save us. Before I continue, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Hit like and subscribe, because what happened next will make your family drama look like a fairy tale. I grew up in Ohio, in a suburb where every cul-de-sac looked copied from the one before it. Maple trees, mailboxes with little flags, summer sprinklers ticking across front lawns. From the sidewalk, we were the kind of family people wave to. Mom with a casserole, dad mowing in neat stripes, 2 kids posed on the porch for school pictures. Inside, the rules bent toward one person. My brother Lucas was the son. The rest of us orbited and didn't ask why. At school assemblies, my mom's clapping got louder when his name was called. For my perfect attendance, she smiled politely and adjusted her purse strap. For Lucas's B- in math, she gasped like he'd solved an equation no one else could touch. The word gifted stuck to him early and never peeled off. He's got such promise, neighbors would say. Such drive. They didn't see that all the pushing came from us. Birthdays drew the clearest lines. Lucas's parties expanded until they started to feel like small-town festivals, yard games, rented bounce houses, gift tables that looked like store shelves. Mine stayed modest, 6 friends, a boxed cake that always leaned, candles that burned too quickly. I learned to cut slices so the decoration didn't disappear. I learned to clean up while everyone talked about the next big thing, his tryouts, his camps, his bright future. When I turned 11, I asked for a set of colored pencils and a sketchbook. We'll see, my mother said. Lucas unwrapped a brand new bat and a pair of cleats so white they reflected the kitchen light. Everyone cheered. I held my paper bag of crayons like a secret. Chores weren't assigned, they landed. Dishes slid toward my side of the sink. Laundry baskets drifted into my room. If I asked where Lucas's share was, my father would lower the newspaper and give me the same sentence, a family motto handed down like fine china: Alice can take care of herself. It sounded like praise when they said it, smooth and polished. It felt like walking home alone after dark without a phone. I became excellent at disappearing into the useful spaces, loading a dishwasher no one noticed, setting out snacks on game nights, writing thank you notes in my mother's handwriting because hers always got lost in the pile of flyers and reminders for Lucas's team. When relatives visited, they'd pinch my cheek and ask about school without waiting for the answer. Then they turned to Lucas and asked about opportunities. My mother would straighten as if she grew taller when they said the word. We believe in his future, she'd reply. And if someone remembered to include me, she added with a proud little laugh, but Alice is independent. Independence meant I knew how to be quiet in the back seat, to pack my own snacks, to fold my own hurt into smaller pieces and put it away. Evenings had a rhythm. Dad home at 6, dinner at 6:30, sports on the television afterward. Lucas stretched on the carpet while my father narrated plays like they were life lessons. See that? That's commitment. If I brought my workbook to the coffee table and asked about long division, my father would nod toward the kitchen. Ask your mother, Alice. In the next room, the sink hissed hot water and steam rose like a curtain. I learned to solve problems by myself, pencil marks pressed hard enough to emboss the page. Sundays were church and afterward potluck. In the fellowship hall, we filled paper plates and my parents accepted compliments about their children like they were accepting trophies. It surprised no one when Lucas bowed his head and thanked the lady with the marshmallow salad. It surprised everyone when I won a small art contest and someone announced it from the pulpit. Afterward, a deacon told my mother she must be proud. She's always been so capable, Mom said, searching for a word that wasn't love. She found reliable. It landed between us like a folded blanket, useful, plain, but easily forgotten. On school mornings, I packed both our lunches if Mom was running late. She'd kiss Lucas's head and toss me the car keys. "You're good to go, right?" Right. I was good to go. On nights when a storm cracked open the sky and Lucas woke up crying, I padded into his room with a flashlight and a book. In the morning, my parents would say, "What a sweet sister," and then direct me to the hamper overflowing with wet towels. Sometimes I tested the limits. I tried out for the school play and made the ensemble. The rehearsals ran past dinner. After a week, my mother said it was too much for everyone's schedule and asked me to quit, "Be flexible, honey, for the family." When Lucas added another practice, we rearranged dinner, bought a second cooler, divided routes between parents and neighbors with an ease that still startles me when I think back on it. "We'll make it work," Dad said, eyes bright. "This matters." And I learned what mattered for my parents and what didn't. We weren't cruel to each other. That made it harder to name. No one shouted. No one called me a burden. The thousand small choices, they wear you down until you're shaped to fit the shelf they built. And because I didn't break, they mistook my endurance for abundance. "She's fine," my mother would say, and everyone nodded, relieved. Looking back, I don't think my parents set out to favor my brother. Favoritism was simply the path of least resistance. One child who needed constant fueling, one who figured out how to walk on her own. They called it independence. But it was indifference with a ribbon on top. At 16, I smelled like bad coffee and fryer oil most nights, my hair pulled into a tight ponytail under a paper visor at the Maple Leaf Diner off Route 23. I'd pour refills with a smile and tuck crumpled singles into a mason jar labeled college in black marker. Tips meant textbooks. Extra shifts meant application fees. While other juniors spent Saturdays at the mall, I learned how to keep a register balance to the penny and how to charm the regulars into an extra dollar without feeling cheap about it. My guidance counselor circled scholarship deadlines in red. I circled my schedule: school until 3, shift from 4 to 10, homework until midnight. The house creaked when I came in, the kitchen light left on like a pity candle. Mom would call it drive. Dad would call it character. They liked those words on me the way some parents like varsity letters. Meanwhile, a brochure on the counter glowed glossy under that light. A prestigious sports academy in Florida with palm trees, a dorm with turf out front, coaches with resumes that made parents lean forward. Lucas's acceptance came with a financial plan that read like a luxury itinerary: tuition, travel, equipment, tournament exposure. My parents said investment so often it began to sound holy. They sold Dad's fishing boat and temporarily paused contributions to my college fund. I did the math on a napkin during my dinner break, my mason jar versus his boarding school. My jar lost. We drove him to the airport with 2 new duffel bags and shoes that cost my entire paycheck. At security, Mom cried into a wad of tissues and Dad said, "This is your moment, son." I hugged Lucas and really wished him luck. Back home that night, I folded napkins at the diner and listened to the cook's radio rattle with static and country ballads. When the clock hit 10, I kept wiping down booths for another hour because Brenda, the owner, had learned I never said no to overtime. Senior year was an accounting of tiny sacrifices. I skipped prom because the dress money became SAT fees. I learned FAFSA like a second language and filled it out at the library computer, whispering numbers to myself like prayers. When acceptance letters came, I chose the in-state university that combined the most aid with the least distance. On move-in day, we used the family sedan and 3 milk crates. There was no photo on the porch. There was a hug at the curb and a reminder to call. College felt like juggling on a moving bus. I took morning classes, evening shifts at a campus cafe, and weekend inventories at a discount store across town. Sophomore year, I became an RA to cover housing. Junior year, I tutored intro to accounting for students who groaned at debits and credits. Their groans helped pay for my intermediate textbook. Every semester ended with a statement: balance due, interest accruing. I made minimum payments and promised myself I'd attack the principal when real paychecks started. Meanwhile, postcards came from Florida with pictures of training fields at sunset. Mom taped them to the fridge next to tournament schedules. When Lucas needed a new brace or elite cleats, a box appeared on the porch in 2 days. When he sprained his ankle, Dad flew down for a long weekend to support recovery. I iced my wrists after 8-hour cafe shifts and told myself I was building a different kind of muscle. I graduated in a wrinkled gown that smelled like dust, squeezed between strangers whose families filled entire rows. My parents clapped politely, proud in a general way. The next week, the first bill arrived, 6 pages of numbers and a monthly amount that made my stomach flip. I accepted the first offer I got, accounts payable clerk at a mid-sized logistics company. My paycheck feels like a big relief. The climb was slow and steady. I learned to reconcile vendor statements, to untangle a receiver's typo from a real discrepancy, to keep the controller off my back. I studied for the CPA exams at a wobbly kitchen table with a space heater at my legs, flashcards fanned like a lonely game of poker. On payday Fridays, I split my deposit into rent, loans, groceries, and a line called Future that usually ended up covering a flat tire or a winter coat. Lucas's life developed a different rhythm. The academy didn't turn him into a star, it turned him into a brand my parents tried to grow. When recruitment fizzled, they pivoted to entrepreneurship. A used BMW with low miles appeared in our driveway to help him network. Later, the used part disappeared. I came home to visit and found a glossy black car with temporary tags and the smell of new money. "We got a decent rate," Dad said, patting the hood like it purred. "He needs to look the part." The business ideas arrived like weather fronts. First, a sneaker resale venture, limited drops, boxes stacked in the garage like a cardboard skyline. When the market shifted, he pivoted to a pop-up juice bar in a trendy neighborhood with rent that made my eyes water. Juice turned to dust. Then came a luxury rides concept, then crypto rigs humming in the basement until the electric bill made Mom sit down hard. Each time a door closed, another credit line opened. My parents called them learning experiences. The bank called them loans. Lucas called me during one of his pivots and said, "You always were good with numbers. Can you just look at this spreadsheet?" I did and saw red. I kept my head down at work and asked for more responsibilities, the way a person asks for seconds when the first plate wasn't enough. I moved from AP clerk to staff accountant. I learned month-end closes that felt like marathons, year-end audits that felt like standing in front of a fan throwing paper cuts. When I finally passed the last CPA section, I bought a cake on clearance and ate it with a plastic fork at my table. I sent my parents a selfie with the score notice. Mom texted back a string of celebratory emojis and "proud of you, honey." An hour later, she called to ask if I had any advice for Lucas on building a pitch deck. The phrase, "we'll cover it," became a soundtrack. When Lucas overdrew an account, they covered it. When a supplier threatened collections, they covered it. They refinanced the house to consolidate, cashed out a retirement portion temporarily, and borrowed from an uncle with a handshake. I watched the math slide around like puzzle pieces that never fully locked together. I learned to stop offering my opinion. Advice was fine. Accountability was rude. At holiday dinners, Lucas told stories about a venture capitalist who had expressed interest, about a celebrity who had liked a post. People laughed. Glasses clinked. When someone asked me what I was up to, I said, "Year-end close," and their eyes glazed. I started to understand that I was building invisible things, credit scores, reputations, a spine. On late nights, I'd run numbers no one asked me to run. If I added every check I'd written to the Department of Education, every extra shift, every bus pass, what did it equal? Not glamour. Not palm trees. But a life that didn't tilt when the wind picked up. The first time I paid more than the minimum on my biggest loan, I cried in my car in the company lot. It felt like pushing a boulder an inch and seeing it roll back only half an inch. Progress measured in centimeters. That same week, Lucas posted a photo with a caption about chasing dreams and a leased sports car parked diagonally across 2 spots. Mom commented 3 heart emojis. I closed the app and set my alarm for 5:30. If you're wondering whether I resented him, yes, in ways that tasted metallic. But I also resented the arithmetic that trained us. Lucas learned that failure came with a safety net. I learned that success came with a bill. My parents called my grind independence. They called his spending an investment. The label stuck, even when the facts didn't. By the time I looked up from the ledger of my 20s, I had a title with accountant in it, a drawer full of paid statements, and a quiet pride that didn't require applause. Lucas had a stack of canceled LLCs, a garage sale of equipment, and debts that kept shape-shifting but never disappeared. And still, at every turn, there was another check with our family name on it, another promise that the next idea would be the one. 7 years ago, everything snapped. It was a Sunday, the kind Dad liked to call a family business day, even though only one person's business ever mattered. I remember the roast drying in the oven, the clink of ice in his highball glass, the smell of printer toner from a stack of projections Lucas had spread across the dining table. The logo on top read, Copper Hound Bar and Grill, rustic letters, a snarling dog with a craft beer foam mustache. They were proud of that dog, and they wanted me to feed it. "We're ready to scale," Lucas said, tugging at the sleeves of his new sport coat like it was part of the pitch. 3 locations the first year. Maybe 5. Gastropub vibe, patio lights, local bands. I've got a guy for the furniture. Wholesale. It's all about ambience. Dad slid a sheet toward me, the one with a highlighted column labeled Family Capital. "You've been saving," he said, not asking. "We thought you'd want in. It's about us finally doing something together." I studied the numbers. Rent that assumed nothing ever broke. Build-outs estimated like Pinterest boards come true overnight. Staffing costs shaved to the bone. A liquor license line that looked like a wish. Their break-even month winked from the page like a dare. They wanted my entire savings, every coffee I hadn't bought, every weekend shift I'd taken, every refund check I'd rolled into the next loan payment. I swallowed. "How much are you putting in?" I asked. Dad smiled like a banker. "We've already co-signed on a line of credit." Lucas jumped in. "But your cash gets us across the finish line. Then we're opening doors." Grand openings, plural. Mom refilled everyone's glasses but mine. "Alice, honey, this is the chance to be part of something. Your skills and Lucas's vision, perfect match." My skills, I thought, but not my judgment. I read the packet again. No contingency for delays. No sober plan for a slow winter. No payroll float. No hedge against a manager skimming the till. Bars don't just print money, they drink it. "I can't," I said, steady even though my heart pounded. "No, you can," Dad said, and slid the paper closer as if the proximity would change my answer. "It's family." "But I won't," I stated. The room changed temperature. Lucas's mouth twisted. Mom's smile thinned until it vanished. Dad folded his hands on the table, the way he did when he was about to end a negotiation, but wanted the other person to think they'd ended it. "If you don't help the family," he said, each word clipped clean, "you are no longer our daughter." For a second, I thought I'd misheard. The oven fan hummed. A neighbor's mower droned outside. I stared at my father, the man who had once steadied my bike seat and jogged behind me down a quiet street. No longer our daughter. I picked up my purse because my hands needed something to do. My chair scraped the floor. "Think about it," Mom pleaded, but her voice had already gone cool around the edges, like a window fogging before it freezes. "I have," I said, and left. I called that night, then the next. No answer. My text showed as delivered but not read. A week later, I mailed a card for Mom's birthday with a photo of a bouquet I couldn't afford to send. It came back with a yellow sticker, moved and no forwarding address, which I knew wasn't true. On Thanksgiving, I dialed and listened to the ringtone until the call dropped to voicemail, then hung up without speaking. At Christmas, I sent a simple "love you, hope you're well." It bounced. On New Year's Day, I left a message that lasted 44 seconds, most of it breathing. No one returned it. Lucid, sober daylight didn't soften it. An invitation to my cousin's wedding arrived with my name crossed out and family only scribbled across the RSVP. Aunt Joan called to ask if I was coming around, and then hung up when I said I hadn't changed my mind. I bumped into Mom at the grocery store in March. She stared through me and compared avocados. That night I opened my laptop and deleted their numbers, then typed them back in because deletion felt like dying twice. Meanwhile, Copperhound had a grand opening with a rented step-and repeat and a local weatherman emceeing for free drinks. Photos bloomed on Facebook. Edison bulbs, barnwood, wings dressed in sauce that stained fingers red. There was a chalkboard wall where people wrote their favorite quotes in bad handwriting. Lucas posted a video of a line out the door and a caption, "Dreams meet reality." I watched it alone in my studio apartment with the radiator hissing like a snake. January came and the line vanished. The outside heaters broke. The liquor distributor put them on cash-only terms after a check bounced. A bartender quit mid-shift and took the Saturday crowd to another bar 2 blocks over. The patio lights flickered and stayed dark. A fire inspector noticed the exit sign over the back door didn't light up. The guy for the furniture wanted the balance due. The landlord wanted rent. A dishwasher's mother wanted to know why her son's paycheck hadn't cleared. I heard all of it secondhand. A vendor my company used had a brother who played bass for one of the local bands. A server messaged me late one night from a private account. "You don't know me, but you dodged a bullet." I didn't answer. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the seam where the wall met the ceiling and thought about how many ways a person can be right and wrong at the same time. 6 months after the grand opening, Copperhound locked its doors before lunch service and never reopened. Someone taped brown paper over the windows. The snarling dog peeled from the glass in strips. A notice from the Department of Revenue went up like a scarlet letter. The Facebook page went quiet. The phone number disconnect message had the same polite voice that used to wish us happy holidays from the pediatrician's office. I waited for the call. Not to gloat. Not to say I told you so, just to hear my name in their voices. But it didn't come. My last card, a plain white one that said simply "always here," came back again, this time without any sticker. The envelope looked unhandled, as if the mail itself had learned their new rule: no daughter. So I kept going, the way people do when the bridge burns behind them and the water under it stays cold. The silence became its own weather, a steady pressure change I adjusted to without noticing it. The break had happened. Their business collapsed 6 months later. But our family had already collapsed before it. After the collapse of Copperhound and the final silence from my family, I made a decision. If they would not stand by me, then I would stand for myself. It was not quick, and it was not easy. I worked tirelessly, taking on extra projects, staying late at the office, and saying yes to every opportunity. Nights blurred into mornings under fluorescent lights. Weekends bled into spreadsheets and tax reports. Slowly, paycheck by paycheck, I paid down my loans. Each balance that hit zero felt like reclaiming a piece of my dignity. By the time I turned 32, I was free of debt for the first time in my adult life. That freedom lit something inside me. I started saving with purpose, watching my account grow with a determination that bordered on obsession. And 3 years ago, I did what I once thought was impossible. I bought a house. It wasn't some gleaming new condo or a suburban cookie cutter with fake shutters. It was a 1930s Craftsman in Seattle, worn down but sturdy, with peeling paint, squeaky floors, and a garden choked with weeds. Everyone else saw a tired house. I saw a chance to finally root myself, to build something that was mine. I remember holding the keys that first day, standing on the cracked walkway with my heart pounding. The porch sagged, the gutters leaked, and the wallpaper inside smelled faintly of mildew. But to me, it was a castle. I walked from room to room, touching the walls, imagining who I would become in this space. Renovation became my therapy. After long hours at work, I would come home, change into old jeans, and tackle one small project at a time. I learned to sand wood, to tile a bathroom, to patch drywall. I scrolled through online tutorials late into the night, pausing and rewinding until I could mimic each step. My hands blistered, my muscles ached, but each improvement stitched me closer to the life I wanted. The kitchen was my proudest achievement. I stripped out the warped cabinets, repainted the walls a warm cream, and installed open shelving I cut and stained myself. The first night I cooked there, pasta with homemade sauce, eaten at a wobbly table under a single bulb, I cried. Not because the meal was special, but because it was mine. The garden took longer. Years of neglect had turned it into a jungle of ivy and stubborn dandelions. But every Saturday, I pulled weeds until my back screamed, planted herbs, and lined the soil with tomato starts from a local nursery. My neighbors would stop to chat, offering tips and clippings from their own yards. By the second summer, bees hummed between lavender bushes, and I was harvesting cucumbers, peppers, and enough basil to make jars of pesto. That garden connected me to people in a way I hadn't expected. Mrs. Torres from across the street dropped off fresh naan in exchange for zucchini. The Johnson kids came over to help pick strawberries, leaving with red-stained fingers and wide grins. Slowly, my block stopped being just a collection of houses and became a community. For the first time in years, I felt like I belonged somewhere. Inside, the house filled with signs of the life I was building. A bookshelf lined with secondhand novels. A quilt folded neatly at the foot of my bed. A mismatched set of mugs collected from flea markets and vacations. No one had handed me any of it. I had earned every single thing. Sometimes, late at night, I would sit on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the streetlights flicker. I thought about the years I had spent feeling like an outsider, the countless times I'd been told Lucas was the future while I was just independent. Yet here I was the one who survived, who stood up after being pushed down, who carved out stability with her own hands. And as I locked the door each night, I knew no one could take this from me. Because this house wasn't built on their approval. It was built on mine. It was an ordinary Tuesday evening when my phone rang. I had just finished watering the garden, the smell of damp soil clinging to my hands, and was settling in with a book when the screen lit up with a number I hadn't seen in years. For a moment, I froze. My heart thudded so hard it drowned out the cicadas outside. The name flashing across the glass nearly made me drop the phone. Mom. I answered with a cautious hello, expecting a pocket dial or maybe even a scam. Instead, I heard her voice soft, hesitant, and trembling in a way I didn't recognize. Alice, it's Mom. We miss you. Come over for dinner. Please. I should have hung up. My logical mind screamed to stay away. But there was something in her tone, almost fragile, that pried open a door I had bolted shut years ago. Against my better judgment, I said yes. The following Friday, I drove across town, my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened. Their neighborhood looked the same as always, rows of small houses with faded shutters and cracked driveways, but when I pulled up to my parents' home, my breath caught. The once proud two-story with its manicured hedges was almost unrecognizable. Paint peeled from the siding, the porch railing sagged, and the lawn was patchy and brown. A for sale by owner sign, half hidden in the weeds, leaned against the mailbox as though even it had given up. Inside, the shock deepened. The house smelled faintly of mildew and stale coffee. Most of the furniture I remembered, the sturdy oak dining table, the armchairs, the sideboard with framed photos, was gone. In their place were mismatched chairs, a folding table, and bare walls with nail holes like empty eyes. I heard the rumble of an engine outside and turned toward the window. That was when Lucas arrived. A black SUV, sleek and shiny, pulled into the driveway, headlights glaring. He stepped out, designer jacket slung carelessly over his shoulders. From the outside, he looked polished, expensive watch, glossy shoes, the kind of appearance meant to impress anyone watching. But his face told the truth. The dark circles under his eyes looked bruised, his skin was sallow, and when he smiled at me, it didn't reach past his teeth. Ollie, he said, as though the last decade hadn't passed. He hugged me briefly, smelling of cologne layered over something sour, like stale sweat or fear. At the dining table, Mom served what she called dinner, spaghetti from a jar, overcooked noodles, and a bowl of salad that was mostly lettuce hearts. It wasn't the food that struck me, it was the silence between them. My father, once so commanding, seemed shrunken, his shoulders hunched, his hair completely gray. He avoided my eyes, focusing instead on twirling pasta around his fork. Mom fussed with her napkin, her hands trembling. "We're so glad you came, Alice. It's been too long." I nodded politely, my stomach a knot of suspicion and nerves. It has. For a while, conversations stumbled along. They asked about my work, my house, my health. But the questions felt rehearsed, shallow, like a prelude to something else. And I knew, deep down I knew, that this dinner was not about reconciliation. The shift came when Dad finally cleared his throat. His voice, though weaker, carried the same edge I remembered from childhood. Alice, we're in trouble. Lucas leaned forward, his elbows on the table. It's not just trouble. It's serious. You know about the debts. I frowned. What debts? Mom jumped in quickly. Your brother. He's had some setbacks. Unfair partners, bad luck. But we're family and families stick together. There it was. The real reason. Lucas ran a hand through his hair, revealing how thin it had become near the temples. It's not small, Alice. 240,000. I've got collectors breathing down my neck, lawyers circling, and, well, Mom and Dad are scared. I sat there, my fork frozen midair, listening to the clink of dishes and the faint hum of the refrigerator. In another life, maybe I would have felt pity. But right then, I felt only the sharp sting of déjà vu, the same desperate pitch, the same expectation that my sacrifice would fix what they had broken. Dad looked straight at me, his eyes hollow. We know you've done well. We know you bought that house. And we thought, maybe selling it could save the family. The words hung in the air like smoke, suffocating. I set down my fork carefully, afraid my hands might shake if I held it any longer. You want me to sell my house? The house I worked years for, the house I bought with my own blood and sweat. Lucas's face twisted into a pleading mask. Alice, this isn't just about me. If I go under, we all go under. The creditors, I cut him off. We all? I wasn't part of your schemes. I wasn't part of your loans. For 7 years, you didn't even acknowledge my existence. Mom flinched, but still tried to soothe. Sweetheart, don't be so harsh. We made mistakes, but this is a chance to put everything right. You have so much now. More than you need. That last sentence burned. More than you need. As if my hard-won stability was excess, something to be skimmed off and handed to Lucas, the eternal favorite. The spaghetti on my plate had gone cold. I stared at it, feeling the weight of all those years, the diner shifts, the loan statements, the empty birthdays, the silence when I needed them most. They had abandoned me when I was at my lowest. And now that I had built something for myself, they wanted to take it. My chest tightened, not just with anger, but with grief. Because some part of me had hoped, naively, that this dinner might be about love. About recognition. About finally seeing me as more than a backup plan. But no, it was about money. It was always about money. I think I've heard enough. I stated. Wait, Lucas said, his voice cracking. You are my sister. I looked at him, at the boy who once had everything handed to him, now hollowed out by his own choices. And you're my brother. But tell me, Lucas, when was the last time you acted like one? No one answered. The silence was louder than shouting. Dad leaned forward, his elbows pressed hard into the table, his voice low but firm. Lucas owes $240,000. You have to sell the house and help. We're family after all. There it was, no sugarcoating, no polite hints. Just the demand, delivered like an order. Mom sat beside him, nodding, her eyes glassy but unwavering, as if she'd already decided this was the only path. Lucas wouldn't look at me. He just stared at his plate, jaw tight, hands fiddling with his watch as if winding it could change time itself. Something inside me snapped, a mixture of disbelief and anger rising like a wave I couldn't hold back. I pushed my chair back just enough to square my shoulders and meet their eyes. Where were you 7 years ago? I asked, my voice trembling at first, but gaining strength with each word, when I didn't have a penny to my name. When I was scraping by in a one-room apartment, juggling shifts, drowning in loans, and still calling you on holidays you ignored. Where was this family then? My father's face hardened into that familiar look of disappointment, the one he used to use when I brought home straight A's, but he wanted to talk about Lucas's C in math instead. Mom was the first to break it. Alice, don't twist this. We thought you were fine. You've always been independent. You didn't need us. My laugh came out sharp, bitter. No, you just didn't want to need me. It's easier to pretend the daughter you disowned was self-sufficient than admit you left her behind. That was when the accusations began. You're cruel, Mom hissed, her hand gripping the edge of the table. We raised you better than this. Dad's voice boomed louder. Selfish. After everything we've done, after all the years we've carried this family, you'd let your own brother drown. Lucas finally lifted his eyes, red-rimmed and hollow. You don't understand, Alice. It's not just about me. If I go down, it affects them too. Collectors, banks, reputations, it's not just my problem. I stared at him in disbelief. It is your problem, Lucas. You gambled with their money, with their trust, and now you're here asking me to throw my life away too? Why should I be the one to pay for your mistakes? His face twisted with something between shame and anger. Because you can. Because you have the means and I don't. The words hit like a slap. The entitlement in them, the assumption that my sacrifices had somehow made me responsible for his recklessness, made my chest tighten. I pushed my chair back further, the scrape of wood against tile echoing in the hollow dining room. My hands were trembling, but my voice came out steady, sharper than I'd ever heard it before. My house, I said slowly, deliberately, is not your ATM. It is not a slot machine for Lucas's debts, or a safety net for mistakes, or a vault you can crack open when you've drained everything else. It is mine. I built it. I fought for it. I won't let you take everything from me again. The room fell silent except for the clatter of Lucas's fork dropping against his plate. Mom covered her mouth with her hand, as if she couldn't believe I had spoken those words. Lucas muttered something under his breath, too low for me to catch, but the bitterness was unmistakable. I stood, grabbing my coat from the back of the chair. My legs felt heavy, but there was no hesitation in my steps. As I reached the doorway, I turned back one last time. You call me selfish? Maybe I am. But at least my selfishness doesn't ruin everyone around me. At least I can look at what I've built and know it came from hard work, not from draining other people dry. If you think family means sacrificing me over and over again, then maybe you're right. Maybe I really don't belong to this family anymore. I didn't wait for a response. I didn't need to. Behind me, I could hear Mom sobbing softly, Dad muttering something about ungrateful, and Lucas cursing under his breath. But I kept walking, each step out of that dilapidated house lighter than the one before it. When I closed the front door, the sound echoed in my chest like a final verdict. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one being left behind. I was the one leaving. And I wasn't coming back. The next morning began with a vibration I could not shut off. My phone lit up before sunrise, unknown numbers, blocked numbers, the old landline I had forgotten they still owned. The first voicemail was my mother's whisper heavy with theatrical grief. Alice, your father didn't sleep. His heart, he says it's fluttering again. Do you want that on your conscience? The second was my father, clipped and angry. You've forced our hand. Then Lucas, breathless, the quiet menace back in his tone. You can fix this with one decision. Don't make me do something I'll regret. By 8 a.m., the messages multiplied. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years typed paragraphs about family duty. An aunt I barely knew sent a prayer hand emoji and the line, when your father dies, remember tonight. A neighbor from their street texted that my mother was not herself and surely I could be kinder. The guilt was wrapped in sugar, the threats underlined in neon. You're killing your father. You owe us. Sell the house, Alice. And this. I turned off notifications and made coffee I didn't drink. At work, my inbox filled with new sender names. My mother had passed around my email. Your brother has a good soul, one message insisted, as if souls paid debts. Someone posted under a photo of my garden on an old public account. Nice house. Shame to see it gone. I locked all my social profiles, changed passwords, and sat at my desk with my hands shaking so badly I could barely steady the mouse. By lunch, the calls reached my office line. Our receptionist pinged me. There's a Mrs. Matthews demanding to speak with you about a family emergency. I told her to route everything to voicemail. My manager stopped by concerned. I lied and said a relative was ill. The irony felt bitter against my tongue. I took the long way home after work, circling 2 extra blocks, telling myself I was being dramatic. Fear makes everything taller, wider, darker than it is until it isn't. Twilight settled over the street as I pulled up to the house. Something was wrong before I even killed the engine. The porch light was on, but I hadn't set it to come on yet. The screen door hung crooked, the lower hinge pulled free as if someone had leaned their weight against it. The curtain in the front room, which I always left slightly open, was drawn tight. A sliver of movement flickered through the edge. I sat for a beat, listening. Voices muffled. My father's low bark. My mother's tense hush. A third voice riffling through syllables like a stack of cards, Lucas. My stomach dropped. Every instinct shouted leave. But my feet moved anyway, slow and quiet up the steps. I pressed my ear to the door. Metal rasped against wood from inside, a drawer wrenched open, files slapped down. My father's voice. Start with her office, paperwork lives near the desk or in the bedroom closet. My mother. Check the file box with the blue latch. House papers are usually colored. Lucas. Deed, mortgage, title, whatever she signed. We'll figure it out. I stepped back, forcing my breath to slow. Someone had wedged the door with a screwdriver. The deadbolt plate was scored, splinters curled around the strike. I slipped along the side of the porch and peered through the living room window between the curtains. My father stood at my desk, papers fanned across the surface. My mother held my file tabs like a bouquet, lips moving in a frantic whisper as she read labels. Lucas crouched near the bottom drawer, crowbar on the floor beside him, my locked file box already pried open like a tin can. The house didn't look like mine. Every drawer gaped, cushions were tossed, the rug bunched and folded in a way that made me want to smooth it even as my hands shook. The lamp I had found at a thrift store and rewired myself lay on its side, bulb still glowing at a stunned angle. Then I saw it, the hallway beyond them, a smear of red across the far wall. For a second, my brain said rust, ketchup, something spilled. I moved 2 steps along the siding to catch a better angle. On the bedroom wall, the word screamed in wet strokes, traitor. Crimson paint dripped in fat tears down the plaster, pooling at the baseboard. A roller tray sat on the floor with a cheap hardware store brush laid across it, red thick as blood. The smell hit me through the cracked window, metallic, oily, wrong in the place where I slept. My throat closed. I put a hand on the siding to steady myself, the cedar rough against my palm like a small mercy. I slid my phone from my pocket and stepped off the porch, back into the dark where the hydrangeas could hide me. My fingers knew what to do even while my chest shook. 911. The line clicked. Seattle emergency, what's your location? The calm in the dispatcher's voice felt like a rope thrown from shore. I gave the address, my voice catching on the street name. They're inside my house, I said. 3 of them. My parents and my brother. Are they known to you? She asked, and the absurd cruelty of the question made my eyes burn. Yes, I said. They're my family. They broke in. They're vandalizing. They're searching for documents. She told me to stay outside, stay on the line, avoid confrontation. Officers are en route, she said. Do not enter. Can you confirm if they're armed? I swallowed. I don't see any tools. I do see a crowbar. And paint, they wrote on my bedroom wall. Copy. Stay where you are. Keep describing what you see. I crouched behind the low garden bed, the basil brushing my knees, and watched my father lift a stack of envelopes and toss them aside, watched my mother unfold my tax records with a greedy care, watched Lucas shake an accordion file until receipts fluttered like panicked birds. The dispatcher asked if I felt safe to record. I lifted my phone, hit video, and zoomed through the pain at their faces, steadying my elbow against the fence post. The insults continued, even without me in the room. She's always been ungrateful, my father muttered, flipping a manila folder with 2 fingers. If she'd listened, none of this would be necessary. My mother's voice came tight and quick. Check the closet shelf. People hide important things up high. Lucas stalked toward my bedroom. I flinched when he stepped into the doorway and saw the wall. Good, he said, and laughed a sharp, ugly sound. Maybe she'll get the message. My hands trembled harder. I pressed the phone to my ear again. They're still searching, I whispered. Please, how far out are they? The dispatcher was a tether, steady in my ear. 2 minutes, ma'am. Are you visible from the street? No, I said, keeping low. I'm in the side yard. A motion-activated light along the path flared to life as a cat darted past, and I froze, terrified that the sudden brightness would give me away. Through the window, my mother opened the closet. Hangers clattered. She pulled down the shoebox where I kept old birthday cards and dumped them on the bed. A photograph of me and a neighbor kid at last summer's block party fluttered to the floor and lay face up, my smile pointing at the ceiling as strangers handled my life. My father pulled out a folder labeled home warranty and swore when he realized it wasn't what he wanted. Title, deed, closing packet, he snapped. It's somewhere. The dispatcher asked if I wanted to notify a neighbor. I texted Mrs. Torres with a single word, police, and she replied almost instantly, I see the lights. I'm here if you need me. The relief hurt. In the window, Lucas slammed a drawer so hard the knob cracked. My father barked his name. The word on the bedroom wall gleamed wet and obscene. I had the useless thought that I'd have to repaint twice, once to prime, once to cover. The first flash of blue-red bloomed at the corner, washing the porch in color. My heart leaped and then tried to climb up my throat. Tires whispered to a stop. Doors opened softly, then heavier footsteps on the walk. They're here, I whispered into the phone. Stay where you are, the dispatcher said. Officers will announce themselves. A beat later, a firm knock shook my front door and a voice, amplified by training and authority, called, Seattle Police. Anyone inside, announce yourselves. Through the window, everything startled. My mother's hands flew to her mouth. Lucas looked for a back exit that didn't exist. My father went rigid, a man carved out of pride and fear. He moved toward the door with the posture I remembered from childhood, still convinced he could talk his way through anything. I stayed small in the shadow of the hydrangeas, the smell of wet earth grounding me while the scene inside my home shifted from secret violation to lit exposure. I ended the call only when the dispatcher told me the officers had me in sight. A flashlight beam found my shoulder, a calm voice asked my name, a hand gestured me back toward the curb. I stepped into the streetlight, knees unsteady, phone clenched like a talisman. Behind me, the officers spoke through the door again, firm and measured. In the window, my mother started to cry, the practiced kind, the kind that had gotten her what she wanted for years. For once, it was someone else's script, not mine, deciding what happened next. Court days have a style, old paper, cold coffee, something metallic that clings to air-conditioned halls. I learned that waiting on hard benches while my name existed as a case number. The prosecutor called it a straightforward matter, criminal trespass, vandalism, attempted interference with property. But straightforward didn't account for the ache in my chest when I saw my parents and Lucas across the aisle, sitting together like a single unit, refusing to meet my eyes. Discovery unraveled their version of the story. What began as a misunderstanding became spreadsheets and statements, timestamps and texts. Lucas's debt, it turned out, wasn't just a failed business or two. It was a ledger of impulses. Sports betting accounts under 3 platforms, cash advances lined up like dominoes, buy now pay later plans for designer sneakers, a private club membership paid on a credit line, an executive coaching subscription. Weekends at resorts billed as networking. The sum held $240,000, but the shape of it darkened. He hadn't only chased success, he'd rented its costume. When bank records were projected, the courtroom went quiet. There were transfers from my parents' Helic, a loan from an uncle, 2 high-interest personal loans, and fees piled like kindling. Screenshots showed parlay bets that missed by a point, withdrawal limits lifted after verification, a run of midnight wagers on minor league games in cities none of us had visited. I watched the dates and times as if they were weather maps of storms I hadn't seen forming. Then the night at my house. The officer's body cam footage showed my doorway, the splintered jam, my mother's voice tight with urgency, my father directing where to search, Lucas with the crowbar and the file box. The paint tray. The word on my wall. My breath caught when the footage panned past my quilt, the one I'd sewn during a winter of long nights, streaked with red fingerprints. My parents' attorney argued intent, concern for a son, a desperate attempt to locate documents they believed would untangle title issues. The judge's eyebrows twitched at that. Title issues? "You don't solve paperwork by prying open a locked file box in someone else's bedroom," he said, voice dry as a gavel. "And you certainly don't write on their wall." I didn't speak much. When asked, I told the truth. I'd been cut off 7 years earlier. I'd built a life alone. The house was mine. I came home to find them inside, my past reduced to a scavenger hunt. The rulings landed like measured hammer blows. My parents were convicted of misdemeanor trespass and criminal mischief. The judge suspended their sentence, placed them on probation, ordered a fine, and a mandatory class on property rights. "You are not welcome in your daughter's home," he said, each word slow enough to be recorded into their bones. "If you step onto that property again without permission, jail will not be suspended next time." Lucas's outcome was heavier. The court accepted a plea that tied his criminal trespass and vandalism to a mandated path, a comprehensive gambling addiction assessment and treatment program, proof of attendance, random checks, and 200 hours of community service, with an emphasis on restitution-based work. The judge looked directly at him. "You didn't just lose money," he said. "You lost judgment. You will earn both back the long way." There was no swagger left in Lucas then. He nodded without lifting his eyes. As for me, the court issued a full protection order. No contact, no messages through relatives or mutual friends, a 300-foot perimeter around my home and workplace, and an explicit prohibition on entering my property. I was also awarded compensation for damages, replacement of the door and frame, locksmith services, repainting, cleaning, and the cost of the file cabinet and lockbox they'd destroyed. The sum wasn't large compared to what I'd once paid in loans, but it felt different. It said, "What was taken will be returned, even if only on paper." I brought the order home like a shield. The locksmith arrived first. He replaced the deadbolt with a reinforced model, installed a strike plate with 4-inch screws that bit into the framing, and handed me new keys while explaining how the latch engaged. "Stronger now," he said, and I realized he meant more than metal. Then came restoration, quiet and practical. I taped off baseboards and laid drop cloths. The red word glared at me from the bedroom wall, dried into dark ridges. I primed it 3 coats, roller moving slow and steady until the letters became a ghost, then a whisper, then nothing. I chose a new paint color, softer than before, a pale gray that caught afternoon light without reflecting it away. The brush lines were straight, the finish even. When it dried, the room exhaled. I gathered what they'd thrown, the scattered receipts, the curled corners of photographs, the warranty folder rescued from under the bed. I sorted and refiled, not because I trusted paper to keep me safe, but because order itself calmed me. An alarm company came on a rainy Thursday. We walked the perimeter under umbrellas while the tech mapped sight lines. By evening, a paneled keypad glowed near the door, contact sensors clicked softly when I opened a window, and a camera watched over the porch with an unblinking, modest kindness. Another camera, small and discreet, covered the side yard where I'd crouched behind Basil that night. The doorbell learned my friends' faces. The app on my phone pinged gently when the mailman came and logged the movement of wind and squirrels without scolding. I put a yard sign near the hydrangeas and felt ridiculous for a moment, then oddly relieved. Neighbors folded in around me in ways I hadn't expected. Mrs. Torres brought chai and later a thumb drive with footage from her own camera that had captured the patrol car's lights blooming against my house. The Johnson kids offered to repaint my fence for practice, and I let them do one panel while I supervised with lemonade. A retired contractor down the block helped me reinforce the back gate and taught me the trick of driving screws without splitting old cedar. Community replaced the idea of family that had failed me, less showy, more durable. I kept copies of the restraining order in a folder near the door and in the glove compartment of my car. My manager at work had a copy, too, along with security's number and a photo of the 3 faces that now lived on paper instead of at my dinner table. HR asked if I wanted to change my schedule. I said no. Routine felt like a lifeline. Payment on the restitution came through the clerk's office, the check stuttering in for months. I deposited each one with steady hands. The money patched holes, literally, in drywall, figuratively, in the part of me that believed damage was mine to absorb forever. When Lucas's community service supervisor signed his first hours, a court notice arrived in my mailbox. I read it standing on the porch, the afternoon bright and cold. Progress. Documented in ink. At night, the cameras kept quiet watch. A moth's brief glow, the shadow of a raccoon, the soft arc of rain visible only because the infrared knew how to notice what eyes miss. I slept with the window cracked and the system set to home, a square of green on the keypad telling me it had my back. I didn't unblock any numbers. I didn't check court dockets for their names beyond what my lawyer forwarded. The order would last long enough for me to build longer habits. If they crossed the line, the consequence was clear and no longer mine to deliver. That was the point of boundaries, not punishment, but peace with teeth. When people asked, I kept the story simple. There was an incident. It went through court. The truth could stay larger and messier inside me, but it didn't need to spill into every conversation. On the kitchen counter, the folder with legal papers sat beside a bowl of lemons and a list of weekend tasks. Seal the back steps, weed the border, call the painter about the exterior trim. Ordinary jobs. The first time I set the alarm and locked the door to go to work after the last contractor left, I hesitated with my hand on the knob. The porch camera blinked. The app chimed softly. System armed. Front door closed. I stepped into the morning, keys, bag, thermos, and felt the clean line of the boundary at my back. When the court case ended and the dust finally settled, I sat alone in my kitchen with a cup of coffee, staring out the window at my small garden. The air felt different. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the crushing weight of needing to prove myself worthy of my parents' love. For so long, I had chased approval like a child running after a balloon in the wind. Every achievement, graduating, paying off debts, buying my home, I secretly wished would make them proud, that maybe they would call and say, Alice, we see you, we're proud of you. But instead, silence filled those years. And when they finally returned, it wasn't with love, but with a bill attached to my name. I didn't lose a family. I had already lost them years ago when they chose favoritism, when they called neglect independence, when they threw me out for refusing to sacrifice everything for Lucas's doomed dreams. And so, I no longer wait for a call that will never come, nor for forgiveness that isn't sincere. But I'll leave you with this question. Could you forgive parents or siblings who betrayed you for money? Write your thoughts in the comments below. I want to know if you would have acted differently in my place. And don't forget, hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. It may seem small, but your support keeps these real-life stories alive, and maybe, just maybe, this one will remind someone out there that they are not obligated to sacrifice their life for the illusion of family.